We are already online and we can start.
Lovely. Wonderful. Hello then, and welcome to our talk from the Transformative Play Initiative. That's myself, Josephine Baird, Josefin Westeborg, Kjell, Hedgard of Hugaas, and Lynne Bowman. We're all from the Uppsala University Game Design Department, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing, our work, the research and education that we've been involved in. That we hope you'll find very interesting. And thank you very much to Portal 10 for inviting us here. We're very excited to be presenting for you. Can we have the next slide, please? The person who's doing that. Thank you very much. So a little bit about us to begin with. We are based in, as I said, the University of Uppsala Game Design Department. That is based on quite a beautiful island in Visby, Sweden, the island is Gotland. The town is Visby. It's a heritage site, a very well-preserved medieval town in Europe. And it's home especially to the annual Medieval Week Festival, which attracts thousands of tourists, LARPers and reenactors. And so it's a very particularly popular site for our community. Next slide, please. And this is us. As you can see, a very happy picture of all of us together finally. This was us at the Golden Game Conference, which happened very recently in Visby, hosted in part by the University of Uppsala Game Design Department. And we're a little group who's come together to study theory and design principles of analog role-playing games as vehicles specifically for personal and social change. We're a research group, but we're also part of what we feel like is a movement towards an understanding of what games can provide as a transformative opportunity. And this is something that we're very passionate about and we're very excited to talk to you about, which I will hand over to one of my colleagues next and to the next slide.
Okay, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Sparkles. We are also creating and starting to run some courses and a certificate track, and we've been working on that during the last year. So we can take the next slide and you will get some info. So there are 4 new courses that are freestanding that you can apply for. They will start this fall. Now for this one, it's already too late to apply, but we might be able to fix something. You never know. The 4 courses are Introduction to Transformative Game Design, where the focus is to give an introduction and also focus a bit on theory within the field. The second course is Transformative Game Design 1, where we will have slightly more focus on design. Then we have Transformative Game Design 2, where focus will be on implementation. And the final course is Cultivating Transformational Communities, where the focus is upon the communities we have and create. And all of these courses are 7.5 credit at advanced level, that is master's level, and they are run part-time online, mostly asynchronously. That means you don't have class at a specific time, so you can participate wherever you are in the world. And students must use video conferencing for playtesting and feedback session. So that's why it's mostly asynchronous, because you will have to match up with your peers and you have to do things specific days of the week, but we won't give you a certain time of the day to do stuff. That's something you can fix together. Next slide, please. And if you take and you pass all the 4 courses, you get a certificate in transformative game design. And the courses are building upon each other. So you can't start in the middle. You have to start with the first one and pass that one to be able to take the next course. And so you have to take them in order. And we will run 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring. So here's some statistics. All these courses are going to be run for the first time now. And these numbers are from the first application round. And then there will be a second application round coming out in a couple of weeks, hopefully, where we know the final numbers. So here you can see that for Introduction to Transformative Game Design, the first course, we had 89 applicants, and 44 of them had this course as their first-hand choice. And when it comes to gender, I'm sorry, we don't own this data. It comes from higher up in the system, in the Swedish system, outside of our hands. So we only get male-female data. But from that data, it says we have 50 male and 39 female applicants, which is great. Next slide. And this is the second course, Transformative Game Design 1, that will be start in November, so it's later, October, sorry. And here we had 58 applicants, so probably that means all of them also applied for the first course. And 2 people had this one as their first-hand choice. I'm not sure what happened there, because you need to take the first one to be able to take this one. That happens. And here for gender, we have 34 male applicants and 24 female. So it's looking pretty good to be a first run, and then we'll see what happens for the second run. But that's where we are at right now with our courses. So, Kjell.
Yes, the event series. Sorry. For those of you who actually do know about us, you probably do because you have attended one of our events. We've been running now since the beginning of fall last year, an event series where we invite different speakers from across the world, specialists in their fields, to talk about things that are related to transformative play. And you can see here we have a number of different names here. Some of them are hopefully recognizable to you. Others might not be, but as I said, it's a very international pick that we've made. So you see we have 10 full-time lectures where we usually do about an hour and then half an hour of questions and answers. We also have at the end of each season, fall and spring season, we have had a roundtable where we bring in the lecturers that have had full-time lectures, and they go back and forth and talk with each other, also answer some questions from the audience at the end. That is you can get a very interesting conversation going between the different speakers. And then we also have town halls, where we have, it's a little bit of a different format. It's more of a networking and getting like small pieces to digest from the different speakers. And what we do is we run a short lightning talk, and then we go into breakout rooms, everybody who participating, and we talk about how what we've just seen, how that can influence the work that we are doing specifically in our own backyard. And that has been very, very, very good for connecting and for networking. And it's a lot of good things I think will come from that specific format, because when people get to talk together, wonderful things happen. If you want to get more acquainted with our event series, everything is uploaded to YouTube. You just go on YouTube and you search for the Transformative Play Initiative, and you will find all of these wonderful talks there. And I don't know who I'm going to give the word to, but
I'm going next. So next we're going to talk a little bit about our seminar, which will happen in October. So we received some partial funding from the Sustainable Heritage Research Forum on Campus Scotland. And therefore our theme is role-playing, heritage, and culture. So the seminar will take place October 20th through 21st, and it's in person in Visby, and similar to this event, it will also be online on Zoom. And there will be an opportunity for participants to interact, whether they're logging in remotely or they're there in person. We have 4 wonderful keynoters from all over the world, as you can see: Brazil, Copenhagen, Palestine, Poland. So we're trying to really be as diverse as possible in terms of bringing in people from different role-playing game communities. And to give you an idea of the presenters, we have 30 presentations. 8 of those are online, and 17 of those are from 17 different countries, at least. We don't know exactly everybody's country of origin, but we have 49 total presenters, 5 from South America, 13 from North America, 7 from Asia, which includes the Middle East, and 24 from Europe. So we have been, working hard to try to bring people in from communities maybe outside of our own. And in terms of supporting our local university, which is Uppsala University, 8 of our presenters are Uppsala master's or PhD students, and this number is actually wrong. We have 4 or 5, I think, university lecturers and researchers from Uppsala. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our group research, and Sparkles will be talking about our LARPs that we've been designing for researchers.
Yes, so we got a request from the Center for Integrated Research on Culture and Society, aka Circus, because of course we have a circus at our university, and they wanted us to create EduLabs for them. So Circus are a platform for interdisciplinary culture and society research, helping researchers within those areas. So we are designing 5 LARPs with facilitation instructions and 2 academic articles for them. And this will be released in print as a little booklet when we're done. And we are also, of course, running the LARP for them and not just writing them. So 3 LARPs are already designed and play tested, with the 4th being done by August, hopefully. And the 3 we have done so far are Common Ground, that is focused on communication and collaboration skills, as well as addressing the emotions and needs involved in decision-making processes. Then we have the peer-reviewed article, that is about practicing multidisciplinary collaboration, conflict resolution, persuasion, and refining academic work. And we have the committee that is focused on collaboration and assessment, allowing researchers to experiment with taking the perspectives of founders, so on being on the other side of the grant process. And something that was very interesting when working with this is we realized this is a very specific target audience. So that became interesting for playtesting, because you need to not only know the academic system and either been part of it or know it quite well to understand the hierarchies and how that works, but you also need to have worked with applying for grants and how that process works, and have people from very different backgrounds within academia trying to work together and what happens there. So that was a bit unexpected, but really interesting to see how important that became of the process. Okay, I'm handing over to Kjell.
So a project that we've been running ever since the beginning of the Transformative Play Initiative is the Soulful and Sustainable Academia project, also known as Operation SASSY. I'm going to talk a little bit about a specific part of that called Agents of Empowerment, which is a LARP scenario that we developed for Operation SASSY. And it has a starting point of considering the issue of burnout and well-being for academics at all stages of their careers. And we do this by asking the question, if we burn ourselves out, how do we keep our lamps lit? And so this Agents of Empowerment is both a LARP, but it's also a workshop where we create our inner superhero and try to embody the qualities that we think our inner academic superhero would have. So the goals of developing this workshop / LARP is these helpful qualities within ourselves that we wish to amplify. We actually put a lot of focus on, it's not just individual qualities, it's what we can create socially and in community with each other. We need to support each other to change culture. So these academic relationships get turned into transformational communities of support and encouragement when we do this. And we also put in some practices that help us access these inner resources when we are stressed. Some of the things we do in this LARP is that we use guided meditation, character design, as mentioned, world building, symbolism, archetypes, and short role-playing games. And we do this to explore the key struggles in academic environments for participants, to explore important qualities participants wish to cultivate within themselves to serve as sources of strength and resolve when needed in real life. And we explore ways in which academics can support each other through practice. So as you can see, it's a lot of focus on, it's not going to be an academic superstar that comes and saves the day. Everything, when we want to change culture, it happens in social relationships, it happens in building of community. And that is what we've been focusing on in that specific LARP.
And another area of our interest is in looking at gender expression and exploration. As Kjell described, we like to use LARPs to recreate complex sociocultural processes and see if we can transform experiences within them, that way transform people's senses of self and well-being through that experience. And we do that because we think LARP and its uses are really, really good at exploring these complex sociocultural processes. Gender and sexualities are one of the most pervasive and invisible and intersectional social cultural experience, in that it pervades through all of our society. It's almost always not really considered as anything other than just a natural fact, and it pervades into every other aspects of who we are and our identities and our social cultural experience. This aspect, we found, is generally explored through LARPs regularly in all sorts of different ways, whether it's designed for that purpose or not. LARPs that are not designed specifically for examining gender become sites for exploration and expression regardless. Perhaps you can think of examples yourselves of games that you've played that don't necessarily have anything to do with that, and you find yourself being able to explore a sense of your identity, specifically perhaps your gender identity or your sense of sexuality, just as a matter of course. Now, there are some LARPs that are intentionally designed for this purpose. Some of them, the most classic or obvious examples, are Just a Little Love and Mad About the Boy and Mellan Himmel och Hav. These are specifically designed to give people an experience to explore gender, but they're not necessarily intentionally designed for that exploration. And we're very interested in what LARP can do to help us explore this complex sociocultural experience, and what happens when you intentionally design for that, specifically for people who've got marginalized gender expressions. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And I'll pass it on for the next part.
Thank you. So a couple of other topics we've been exploring. One of them is intimacy and role-playing games. A lot of times we talk about personal identity development, but also, role-playing is inherently co-creative. We're exploring new modes of reality and thus new modes of relating. So players can experience, as many of you can probably relate to, or you probably wouldn't be here at this conference, we can experience unprecedented levels of intimacy, vulnerability, and connection, both through play and also within community. And these experiences can fundamentally shake our self-concepts sometimes, and also our understandings of relationships. And so coming from this, how then do we design experiences in order to harness this transformational potential? And we talked a little bit about that with the agents of empowerment, like really focusing on those relationships as being core to the process. And then, of course, the question becomes, what is the role of bleed when things bleed in from the outside frame into the role-playing frame and vice versa. And some examples of that, we're sort of terming this relationship bleed in general, but romantic bleed is one that is often experienced, where people experience attraction or romantic feelings towards their co-players after they have played closely in a LARP. And so we've been integrating some psychological theories to talk about intimacy. There's a lot more than just these, but these are interesting, particularly because they play with role oftentimes, and also and emotional dynamics that can actually be baked into character concepts. So in transactional analysis, which is also kind of colloquially known as games people play, and by games, they mean games within relationships, not actual games. We shift into these different ego states. So sometimes we're parent, sometimes we're adult, and sometimes we're a child. And we do that throughout the day without even really realizing it. So of course, that's quite interesting in terms of role-playing games and playing characters. And then there's the drama triangle, where people tend to fall on the persecutor, the rescuer, or the victim role. And again, anytime we're playing sort of a heroic fantasy, particularly trope, or any other kind of trope, oftentimes we will create characters that fall into these categories. And then those are considered to be dysfunctional relationship categories. So when we're playing the hero, sometimes we're actually disempowering other people, which is something that we don't often think about. So there's been efforts to think about the empowerment triangle. So how do we shift from the persecutor to the challenger, the rescuer to the coach, and the victim to the creator? So how do we come at this from a place of empowerment? And I think that would be a really, really important thing for us to explore in role playing. How to shift those dynamics in ourselves through our characters. And then finally, there's attachment theory, which some of you may have heard of. The idea is that based on our early experiences in life, as we grow up, when we engage in relationships, sometimes we have a very secure attachment with others where we feel supported, we know that they love us and that they'll be there for us. But oftentimes, if we haven't had that secure attachment, if we feel insecure in our attachment, we may be anxious or avoidant in our ways of being with others. And of course, those can be baked into role-playing characters as well. And then we're going to talk a little bit about role-playing games and skill training. As many of you know, role-playing games are a really important way to train skills, even if we don't realize we're doing that or not. I've been conducting a larger research project on transformative role-playing game design. I've conducted 57 semi-structured interviews with psychologists, therapists, educators, and neuroscientists who are familiar with role-playing games. And I'm coding that data currently. And we're presenting some papers and doing some book chapters, which we'll talk about in a second based on this work. But in general, role-playing games can help us practice cognitive skills. These are what we call, quote unquote, mental activities, such as perspective taking, tactical planning, scenario building, systems thinking, that sort of thing. There's many, many more other than these, but this just gives you an idea. There's affective skills. So these are emotional activities. Developing empathy is talked a lot about, but also expressing and identifying our emotions. And then there's behavioral skills, which are other noticeable activities such as relational behaviors and, things like teamwork, leadership, debate, persuasion. Whenever we're behaving in a certain way that involves other people, I would consider that a relational behavior. And of course, if any of you know anything about psychology, these are not discrete categories. They overlap. We mostly use these categories for convenience when we're discussing these complex human processes. And so next, we're going to transition into talking about our individual research. But as you can see, we're very interwoven. So oftentimes our individual research, we bring other people in on. So my research projects lately have been about role-playing games and spirituality. So how can we explore our own spiritual beliefs and practices, as well as philosophical questions we might have through games? I co-wrote with Russell Murdoch and with Rebecca Roycroft a game called Epiphany, which is based on Mage the Ascension, for anybody who is familiar with that game. And the idea was to create a spiritual retreat where all of these mages that are awakening into their power can talk about their own spiritual beliefs and share their practices with others and ask philosophical questions about, the meaning of life, their purpose in it, that sort of thing. And so I've written a paper about the process of designing this and also my own process of playing it. That'll be in a volume called Fictional Practices of Spirituality. And that is called The Epiphany Experiment, Role-Playing for Personal Transformation. And the idea here was that we're not just playing characters, we were actually designing characters that were basically versions of ourselves. And then I've also been looking a little bit at mythology and archetypes, which I've always been quite interested in. How can we use personal and cultural narratives and symbols to make meaning in our lives through play? And this week, actually, I presented at the Evolution of Story, Unraveling the Hero's Journey Symposium. So some of you may be familiar with this familiar story of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell popularized. This symposium was about trying to unravel that and look at other ways that we can tell stories. And so I gave a talk on finding the self in role-playing games, weaving myth, narrative, and identity. And the argument that I was making is that we shouldn't throw away the hero's journey. There's a lot of really potent things about it, but it's really also interesting in role-playing games because we can explore lots of different archetypes and identities. We don't have to just play the hero. We can play the witch. We can play the trickster, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of power that can be unlocked in those archetypes. And then with Kjell and Josephine, I've been working on talking about Larp as a transformational container, a place where we can explore identity and also a place where we can sort of practice social change. So how can role-playing games be used to explore new identities and social realities in ways that actually can transform us off game? And the idea here is not to try to change people through LARP, but rather to create these containers where people can have experiences that are supported by the community, where if they want to undergo a personal transformation, they have the possibility to do that. And so an example of this is from last year's Knutspunkt book, the Book of Magic, Vibrant Fragments of LARP Practices, where Kjell and I wrote, Magic is Real, How Role-Playing Can Transform Our Identities, Our Communities, and Our Lives.
Yeah, and this is what's so interesting about looking at transformative experiences through LARP. One of the ways that we talk about this is how we can transform ourselves, not necessarily into something new, but perhaps to consider who we are authentically in our lives and in ways that we might not be able to express in everyday situations, and how we might be able to transform our sense of self and expression rather than turning into somebody new, maybe actually being able to learn how to express who we actually are. And that's part of what I'm interested in. My general work has been focused on game design, gender, and sexualities, but my current project and relation to what Sarah formal learning environment. This is the sense that people who are non-normative generally tend not to be able to engage with formal environments, specifically learning environments. We don't learn about ourselves in places that people normally learn about things. We don't go to universities or schools because these are places that generally follow a normative sense of what is important, what is critical, what is a learning objective in itself. So we look for non-formal and informal learning environments, say nightclubs or LARPs. In order to do this, however, we may sometimes need an alibi, an ability to say that we're doing this in a way that is okay in terms of the relationship to normative society. In normative society, it's generally not considered okay to explore gender. It's also generally not considered okay to play, except for, of course, when play is allowed, as in a game or a LARP. And in LARP, it's okay to play with gender because it's a game. It's a fictional world. So, for example, our nightclub performance space is actually not based in our reality. It's based in a fabulous fey reality, an other world where this nightclub appears out of nowhere and is portentous and important to those people who need it. It allows us to play with something fictionally with the alibi that it is just a game, but it is pretty close to reality. So it allows for us to play with something that is close to our sense of self. And in that way, it allows us to practice difference, to practice being different, to practice being ourselves. It allows us to express ourselves. and also to be validated. Because one of the things that's most difficult when you're expressing something that is non-normative is that you won't be recognized as that. People won't see you that way. But in this environment, you can be seen that way. You can be validated. You can have your identity reflected back at you in a safer container of play. With the ultimate goal, of course, for that to be able to bleed out into everyday life. This is to allow for the transference of the experience that you have in a game out of the game, to transform that experience, to transcend that experience, and specifically in relationship to an empathy of self. Or if, for example, you decide that you're not trans, that you just explore gender and you're interested, that you might create a sense of empathy for others. So Euphoria, this game, is currently being designed. We're hopefully going to be able to run these later in the year, and we're going to be researching the impact. We're hoping that it'll lead to a transformative experience for both people who are interested in exploring gender diversity, in whether it's for themselves or for others. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I just realized this is an extra slide. These are some articles that I've been involved in writing recently. If you're interested in looking and finding out about this particular work, there's an environment that's coming. There's an article that's coming out in Game Environments very soon, which is looking at the learning theory and basis of this. There is an article in International Journal of Role Playing, which specifically talks about the impetus for this, in which I talk about my own journey and why we've picked these environments. And there is an article in Foundations of Digital Games, which looks at what are the difficulties of trying to design games for this purpose. And if you're interested in looking at just my general personal journey towards this, there is an open access book called The Ludic Society, in which I talk about why I started doing this at all in the first place. And if you're interested in anything else, you can go to my website, josephineallison.com. Thank you very much. I'll pass it on to somebody else.
So I have two main focuses of research that I've been doing for a while. And the first one is death and dying in games. And the question I approached this with is how we can use role playing to practice and prepare ourselves for this final stage of our lives. The work I've been doing has been so far quite also ethnographical, meaning that I've used my own experiences in play to try to make some connections and understand how these things actually work. I have an article that is currently in press. I've learned, becoming an academic later in life, that it takes time to publish if you want to publish academically. I finished the article last year, but it's approaching publication right now, and it's called "Practicing Dying: How Role-Playing Can Help Role-Playing Games Can Help Us Accept Death and Boost Our Quality of Life." It's actually a surprising amount of research that shows this practice can actually have very positive effects on our quality of life. But of course, as I said, it's autoethnographic, both as a player and a designer, so it has also influenced my design practices. The last few years, the oldest Larp on this list, Hello in There, is from 2019. So I made these, all of them are chamber Larps. Some have not run yet, or two of them have not run yet, but are designed to run pretty soon. They're all about exploring death, dying, loss, and grief, and both from the perspective of the character actually passing away, from their family members, and so on. The other other field that I conduct study towards is bleed and role playing. And the question I approach that with is, how can we understand, conceptualize, and make use of the role-playing phenomenon of bleed? And when I say make use, it's how can it be useful to us as players? The experiences we have in game, how can they bleed out and be useful to us in our real lives? I've been doing this for a while. The first article I published in January 2019, but it took a couple of years to get there. It's on nordiclarp.org for those who are interested. It's called Investigating Types of Bleed in LARP, Emotional, Procedural, and Mimetic. And I've just handed in my master thesis. It's actually right now at my examinator, so I don't really know how that is going to end, but it's a culmination of the last, I would say, 5 years of looking into this and studying it and trying to make some connection. It's called Bleed and Identity, a conceptual model of bleed and how bleed out from role-playing games can affect a player's sense of self. Two things that I want to bring out from that thesis is it's two concepts that I present there. One is a relational matrix of bleed, which is my attempt at gathering all the threads that have been written on bleed so far, the different types of bleed, how do they stand in relation to each other. It's a quite rudimentary model, but I think it's helpful for us to understand when we talk about these different types of bleed, what are we actually talking about? Right now, there's a lot of concepts up in the air and not too much foundational work to put them all together. I also talk about the bleed perception threshold, which is a new concept, which basically says that bleed happens all the time, but since it's subjectively experienced and then also self-reported, you need to have a bleed experience that passes your bleed perception threshold for it to be noticeable. And so there's a lot of bleed going on that we're not even aware of. For those who are more interested in this, I will be presenting at the Transformative Play Initiative seminar in October. Not my entire thesis, because that is way too big, but I will be talking about the conceptual model there. And I'll hand over to the next one.
Yes. So I've mostly been nerding on education. It's supposed to say learning, not earning. Even if you earn the stuff after you've learned stuff, absolutely. And this, of course, in relation to role-playing games. So this is just what I focused on during this year that we've been working here. So I have made a presentation at the PCA conference, that's the Popular Culture Association conference, where I looked at learning and transfer through role-playing games and EduLarps from a cognitive perspective, which has been very interesting to do research on and figure out like how does our brain work and what can this mean for role-playing games and learning. Then I am hopefully going to also not just present at the TPI seminar, but also produce an article for the AJRP, International Journal of Role-Playing Games. Because you see, when you sit and you try to do education about this, and you try to talk about the things that we as a community know, you realize we don't have words for everything we want to say, like things that we just know, but we don't really know how to talk about them or how to like differentiate them from other things and other concepts. And I run into this a lot right now when I'm sitting and trying to do my presentations and talk about game design. I'm like, we don't have a word for this. They talk about it like this in digital games, but it's not the same for us. So you end up with creating new words and trying to explain the concepts in a new way. And all of a sudden, you end up doing a full matrix, just like Kjell, but in a slightly smaller perspective. So that's what I did. So that's what I'm writing about now. So I'm talking about matrix mapping design components with relation to learning objectives. So it's still in development, but hopefully you can see and hear more about it at the seminar and also an article. Then, as we talked about finding words, I realized that what type of documents we use when we talk about Larp are sometimes called different things in different communities, and that's how it will be always. But sometimes it gets really confusing. It's really good to have this written down somewhere that this is how we see it in this part of the community. And then people can agree and disagree, and hopefully over time we can find words to understand what we are talking about. So therefore, I am also working on an article about naming of documents, specifically in this case about game design, that I will send into Nordic Larp. Then, as mentioned, we are also working on stuff slightly together. We're not good at only doing single projects. So together with Josephine and Sarah, we are at Vopicon's academic track presenting about analog role-playing games as vehicle for co-creative social skill development, which is also based on Sarah's interviews for her book, where we are looking specifically at the co-creative part of the learning. And then Sarah got an email from a German guy saying, "Hi, we are writing a book in German about role-playing games for education, and we would love for you to write for us." So me and Sarah are writing 2 chapters for this German book. We are not going to write in German because we don't speak German. We're writing in English, but the book will also be translated to English as the plan, so it will become available. And there we are working on 2 specific chapters that are called Didactic Potential of Role-Playing Games. And in this case, that will be more towards tabletop role-playing games, because that's what the book is focused on, and less on LARP. But when we mentioned LARP and that we have worked a lot with LARP, they actually asked us if we could write a chapter specifically about what we can learn from EduLARP and other non-tabletop role-playing games. So we are going to do that also. So as you see, it's a lot of things in development at the same time. And I have learned that this is usually the case. So we want to just go back to the fact that we see this not just as us doing a project, but also as more of a movement. And we would love for all of you to join us for the Transformative Play Revolution. And you can do this by liking us on Facebook or subscribing to our YouTube channel, where you can find all the event series talks and also presentations that we do as a group. We try to put up there so it's available for everyone to see and take part of. Here you have our contact information if you want to email any one of us, or just use the Transformative Play email so you can reach all of us. And a big thank you from us at the Transformative Play Initiative at the Department of Game Design at Uppsala University. And I think we also have time for questions.
Thank you very much for such an informative, really, not just transformative, but also very informative presentation. And as we still have 15 minutes, this is a great opportunity for some questions. Please come so you can be seen. Come.
Hello. Hi, it's nice to meet you. Okay, so thank you much for the presentation. And I have one question because I lost one information. Is this still possible to join this year edition of the Course Towards Certificate? Because you said that you need to take all the courses in order to finish the whole story, and I've understood that the first one is already closed out, so I'm not sure how does it work.
Yeah, Sparkles can probably handle that. There is a slight possibility to join late, but that's kind of a slim chance, so I'll let Sparkles explain. But we do have a new round of applications for next year coming soon.
Yeah. So this has to go through the Swedish system right now because it's a single courses, but we have tried to fix that so you can apply even from outside. And here you have the first application round is done in June, so it's finished and done, and then you have a second. And then depending on how that goes and how it looks and the resources from the department, you might be able to open it up for late applications. And we don't know that yet, if that's the case, if we can do that and how many students we have. We love to have many students, but we also need to actually be able to be there as teachers for you. So it depends a bit on what happens in the application round. but it might open up for late applications. So it might be a chance, but we do not really know that as of right now. But if you follow us on Facebook, we will definitely update there if that is the case, if it opens up. And then there is also information about how to apply and how you do all of that available.
And just a little bit about the international round. I believe that opens in December for the next year. So if you do want to try to apply for next year, you don't have to do it in the Swedish round, which can be a little bit difficult to navigate, and that will open in December. But again, it is technically possible to register later. It's just not advised.
So there will be another year, especially for the internationals, this course. Wonderful.
There'll be a year for everyone, but the next round to apply for next year will start around December.
And there are, for some reason, different system for international people applying and national people, but it all goes into the same course after anyway. It's just how the systems are built.
Thank you. Any other question? If so, then I have a question, because sometimes not everybody has time to join the whole course. Is it possible to join certain parts of it? That's one question. Or it has to be continuity. Another one is if there will be any kind of open events, like an international conference or a Transformative Play Festival, something where we can come just for a weekend, for example. Do you plan anything like that?
I can start with the courses and then I'll hand over to Sarah for the second part. For the courses, like you have to take them in order, but you could take the first and the second and then say, well, I want to wait and then wait a year and then take the third and the fourth one later. Or you could just take the first and say, this is what I want to do and that's fine for me. But we are also trying to put up all like lectures and things that we do as part of the course on our YouTube channel. So you could access that without taking the course. If you take the course, you will of course get the credits and you will get to do the designs and you will get chapters in books that we think you should read. So you will get more than if you don't take the courses, but you can still access most of all our presentations and lectures that we will run. So you can still access just those parts if you want to. Because you also have it, since it's at advanced level, you need to have a bachelor's since before to be eligible to apply. And if you don't have that, you can still access a lot of the lectures online. And then I'm handing over to Sarah for the second part.
So the seminar is the closest thing to what you're describing in terms of coming to see us. And that will be, it's not on a weekend, it's on Thursday and Friday. During the week. And we, like I said, we will be able to have online participation for people who can't make it to Visby. And we also have a certain number of seats set aside. So about, 35 extra seats that we have for people who want to go physically to the conference. We aren't currently planning any kind of Larp festival. As you know, that's a lot of work, but at some point, maybe in the future, depending on, how things go, that could emerge with time. But, we, as we've mentioned before, we live in this beautiful medieval city with lots of different opportunities for, for playfulness. There's a medieval festival that happens every summer. That's this huge, like really, really cool week-long festival with everybody in costume. So it's already a very LARPy space. And so we anticipate that people may eventually want to run things there, which we, are willing to have conversations around. But currently we're just focusing mostly on the academic end of things.
Thank you that you mentioned this medieval week, because that was exactly what I was referring to. I was thinking, wouldn't it be marvelous to have some kind of a conference or an event somewhere around this week combined, so people could come for the festival and then to see Transformative Play Initiative events. And I really hope that maybe somewhere in the future it might happen. And what are the further plans? Are you also going to expand, or for example, to have more connection with other universities, going as a guest lecturers, or now you are focusing more on Uppsala?
I mean, we're open to all sorts of, collaborations. And I can't really go into too many more details because there are things that are kind of in the works. But currently, our education is focused at Uppsala. That being said, anybody can take it from anywhere in the world, and it's actually free for EU citizens. So, it already has sort of an international element to it. And of course, if anybody wants to invite any of us to speak for their classes, we'd love to join. I assume I'm not speaking out of turn for everybody here.
Thank you. It was we were consulting with Valentina when you said about the European, that it's free for all Europeans, and she said, "Oh, I'm a resident," but residents, as I understand, has the same laws as the EU citizens.
Residency does not necessarily guarantee you the ability to take the classes, unfortunately. But citizenship of any EU or I think EEA country does. So just having residency isn't enough, unless you're a resident of Sweden.
Thank you.
And you can still apply for the courses, but then they might not be for free. That's the difference, depending on where you're from.
Thank you. That's important information, because we have many young Larpers, young designers who were asking about it, and some of them, they are with a migrant background and they are resident in Poland, for example, or in Slovenia from other countries. And for example, for Erasmus Plus projects, they are eligible because they are residents. But as I understand, for the university, it needs full citizenship. It's just good to know. So then we will know that there are also other sources available, that most of the materials, as you said, they are online or can have access. Or there is a possibility to join, but with a fee. Yes? Yeah. So there are different possibilities. Are there any other questions? Yes, please. 5 more minutes.
It's me again, I'm sorry. I have one more question about the conference, because only after you said that you need to be a bachelor to apply for the courses, it struck me that maybe the conference is also thought only for people with bachelor's, master degrees, PhDs, or me not having any degree, just being interested, could I come? Wonderful.
Absolutely.
And if I understand correctly, the seminar in October is also the free one, or how does it work?
Yes, it's totally free. I mean, obviously, you have to pay for your own lodging and, travel and things like that, but the conference itself is free, a seminar.
And you don't have to have any academic background. It is an academic conference, so it's good to know that. That doesn't, you are super welcome anyway. But it is an academic conference, so it will be academic presentations. But that can be super interesting no matter your background.
We also have some people that are practitioners that are not, strictly speaking, academics that are presenting.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And another question I would like to direct to Kjell. If it's the correct pronunciation, please tell me if it's not. It was really interesting to see the approach to death. I think this is your field of research. And as on Portal Conference, we had many different topics. A lot was going around queer and non-binary, and but there was nothing about death. And that was something now when you mentioned very interesting. And I was thinking, will there be any available soon seminars, or what can we expect to learn more in this field?
Well, first of all, I do have this article that is about to be published later this year. But what I wanted to say is I think it's very natural for us to not think too much about death. I think that's not only a very human thing that we try to not think about it at all, but I think also our hobby, our passion, LARPing, it's a fairly new thing. I mean, I know historically it's been around forever, but the LARPing communities in most countries, if not all of them, and especially internationally as well, we're fairly young people. Like, I'm in my mid 40s, and I'm still fairly much a grown up in this community, and we don't think about that death when we're young. I actually only started looking into it because I had a health scare of my own, where I had to actually start thinking about what would it be to face my own end. But I think games have a very, very unique way of preparing us, not only for death, but for any kind of situation we can get to experience in life. Because and I go a little bit into this, but it's really interesting. Neuroscientifically, psychologically, social psychology, they all kind of support the idea that what happens to your character actually happens to you as a player as well. Now, it's really important to say that if you have an experience playing a certain setting, it doesn't mean that you have experienced what people who experience that have experienced. But you get a little bit of a taste, and our minds and our bodies are not really that good at discerning what actually happened to my character and what is happening to me. So yeah, I just chose death because I think it's a really interesting subject, and I think spirituality, religion, psychology, all of us, all have been trying to explain this for thousands of years, and nobody has really gotten it right yet. So why not LARP?
Thank you for bringing up this very important topic. And thank you all for being with us on Portal as well.
Thank you so much for having us and allowing us to present remotely. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your event.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.